I have an incident I want to tell you about real quickly. I did a program in Las Vegas many years ago, or well, not many, like about 5 years ago, a radio show. I did an interview and talked for a couple of hours, but I mentioned in passing on that show about 5 years ago that about reptilian gods, or ancient gods that look like reptiles. And after the program, I got a phone call from a man in Las Vegas who was telling me about an incident where there were like 5 or 6 families. They were all Christians, incidentally, all Christian families, and this man was telling me the story that all 6 of these Christian families, the men worked together, and the company, they all worked at the same company, and every year they'd take off on a vacation because they were all belonged to the same church. They were all friends, so they would take off on vacations together. And this particular year, and this is about 4 or 5 years ago on the radio, and so the guy called me after I was off the air, and he called to tell me this experience where these 5 or 6 families had been were going out, not mountain climbing, but backpacking in Colorado on their vacation together. And he said they were up on a mountain one morning. They come up over a mountain one morning and looked down in the valley. And we're talking about 5 or 6 Christian families here, men and women and children. And he says, and we all saw that there was a ritual, some sort of a ritual going on in the valley that we had come up on that we were not expecting. And there was a large round area out in the valley. We were up on the mountaintop looking down. This large round area in the valley had been cleared away, and there was a round circle of people wearing robes, and they were swaying back and forth, holding hands and chanting. And there was obviously a priest or someone in the middle with a robe. And he said, we were pretty far away, but we weren't that far. We could see what was going on. And so he said, we told the children to be quiet, and no one said anything because we realized we were interrupting some sort of a religious ritual or whatever. And he said, while we were standing there, in the circle appeared another entity out of nowhere, and it was much, much larger in size than everyone else that was there. And he said the moment it appeared in that circle from out of nowhere, it pointed up at us, and the ritual stopped, the singing stopped, everyone pointed up, and we knew that we've been seen. And he said, so we figured we were far enough away up on the mountain, and they were out in the valley that, you know, they would never catch up with us. He said, we turned to run, and that entity that was in the circle was there within a few seconds. It confronted us. It came all the way across the valley and up the side of the mountain. It was not human. And he says, there were 6 families here. We're talking about 6 Christian families with women and children. And he said, we all stood there and watched this thing and saw this thing. He said it was well over 7 foot tall. It was extremely muscular, almost an obscenity. It was extremely muscular and body form. He said, but it was designed like a male human. But it was totally filled with scales, and the head, this thing's over 7 foot tall, the head was the head of a reptile. And he said, it stared at us, and we could tell this thing was an extremely intelligent. It was not a reptile in the normal sense. And he said, this thing stood there staring at all of us. And he said, I was amazed. Even the children didn't cry. No one could do anything. They were so frightened. He says, and it finally decided that we were not a threat to it, so it turned like it was going to leave, and then it stopped and turned back around and looked at the men, and it never said a thing. He said, but we could tell what it was thinking, that it was very unhappy that we had interrupted its ritual, and it was trying to decide what it was going to do about us. And he said, and it finally turned, and in just a flip of an eye, he said, just a twinkling of an eye, it was gone. Zing, it was gone. And he said, then went back down into the circle. He said, we took off running, and no one said anything. We just ran and ran and ran. And he says, so this morning when I heard you on the radio talking about reptilian gods, he says, I got news for you. They're still here. We saw one.